Today we're going to begin with prohibition. Now, if I were to say something is prohibited to you, what does that mean? Not allowed. It's prohibited. The era of prohibition in America has to do with what substance? Alcohol, okay? And prohibition was really kind of an experiment in America. It's one of the last peculiar ideas of the progressive reform movement, which all began, you can argue that the idea of prohibition began with the Second Great Awakening, back in the early 1800s, when women were reforming against the demon rum and anti-saloon leagues, and so it's been almost a century in the making, the 18th Amendment. But, it's loudly supported by many new crusading churches and by many prohibitionist women. Large movement by women. Okay? So this dry order, which was authorized in 1919, became the 18th Amendment to the Constitution. It actually changed the Constitution to not allow alcohol to be consumed, manufactured, transported, possessed in the United States of America. Now, there were some exceptions. Some pharmacies could have possession of it for prescription use. You had to get a prescription for alcohol. Doctors became very popular. The name of the legislation that led to the 18th Amendment is called the Volstead Act. Volstead, Volstead Act. The legal abolition of alcohol was especially popular in what regions of the United States do you think? More conservative regions. South and West. Okay, the South and West. Southern whites were eager to keep stimulants and alcohol out of the hands of black people, lest they burst themselves out of place, or their place. Racism continuing. And in the West, prohibition represented an attack on the vices of the Western saloon. You've ever seen a Western with your dad? Always a saloon. Public drunkenness, prostitution, corruption, and crime were all present in that Western. But despite overwhelming ratification of the 18th Amendment, there was strong opposition that persisted in the cities of the Northeast, where there's a large concentration of foreign-born people, where alcohol is not stigmatized. There's no negative connotation to it. It is part of their culture. People like the Irish, the Germans, the Italians. It's not a negative thing, okay? So, prohibitionists, if I could describe them in a word, it is naive. Naive. If you were to be told you could never drink Dr. Pepper again, you'll make it your life's quest to drink Dr. Pepper. You find a Dr. Pepper, what are you going to do? You're going to chug it and find another one. Americans don't like to be told what to do, okay? So, the prohibitionists overlooked the tenacious American tradition of strong drink and weak control by the government. That's what we want. Now, when I say we, I mean the greater we, okay? Especially when it came to their private lives. The government can tell you what's on your kitchen table. Evidently. Does that sound like small government control? Sounds like big government control. So, And all the while, the legislators who are passing this kind of stuff, they got, like, they'll be up there giving a speech about the evils of alcohol while they got a flask in their jacket pocket, literally carrying booze with them. So hypocritical legislators spoke or voted dry all the while drinking. Many of them give their speeches drunk. Alcohol is evil. And then they turn their back and take a drink. But the very nature of prohibition changes American society forever. So first off, how do you enforce this? It's one thing to have a law. You got to enforce it. Like if the speed limit in Sofia is 25, it is 25. If you never saw anybody get pulled over, and they never checked people's speed on that road, is the speed limit 25? Could you drive 50? Could you drive 80? Yeah. A law is fine. If you don't enforce it, is it really a law? So how do you enforce prohibiting alcohol in the United States of America? I'm sure that this sign's doing a lot. Look at what's going on around that sign. Yeah, it's not water in those bottles, okay? So the United States had to employ basically a large army of enforcement officials. How many people is it going to take to monitor and enforce the prohibition of alcohol in the United States of America? A lot. So needless to say, state and federal agencies were wildly understaffed. And the people that they had doing the snooping were susceptible to bribery. Hey, here's a gallon of whiskey. Keep your mouth shut. Thanks. Okay. Bribery. Also, these government officials that were doing the work to find these illegal booze makers and distributors, they were underpaid. So they could supplement their salaries by bribes. It sounds like a great system, doesn't it? So prohibition, simply just, it changed America. Because previously, if a man wanted to get a drink after work, what happened? What did he do? Where you go? Where would a man go? To a bar. Okay? Bring his wife? No. Men only in the bar. Okay? After Prohibition, bars are closed. You don't just walk into a bar. They're closed. So you got to find a secret bar. The secret bars are called speakeasies. That's what they're called. Speakeasies. One word. And because alcohol was illegal for everyone to drink, you would see men there, you would see women there. Men and women drinking in the same place. These are actual pictures of speakeasies in America during Prohibition. You see men and women together drinking. This fundamentally begins to change some ideas, okay? To get into the speakeasy, you had to know the passwords, very, very all, secretive. But other things changed because of Prohibition. People, since alcohol was more scarce, alcohol was seemingly more difficult to come by. And so when you could get a drink, you wanted it to be extremely potent. And so you began to see the consumption of hard liquor increase dramatically, which is not good for people's health. Okay, so the increase of hard liquor consumed by both men and women increased dramatically during Prohibition. People drank more during Prohibition than before Prohibition. People drank more during Prohibition than before it. Because beverages of high alcoholic content were much more popular. You could get more bang for your buck. It's much easier to hide a bottle of alcohol in your boot than it is to have a keg of beer. It's much larger. Hence the name. Like when you you're hiding alcohol in your boot, you are bootlegging. That's where the name comes from Prohibition. Okay, so other people just made this stuff at home, homebrew and bathtub gin, and it killed people and made them blind because they didn't know what they were doing. If you get alcohol from somebody who don't know what they're doing, it contains toxic chemicals and can kill you. You ever seen the bottles with the 3 X's on it? That's the stuff that you don't want because it comes out of the still first and it contains heavy metals which can blind you. All right, from what I've been told. All right, so this homemade rot gut was very dangerous for American people, producing blindness and even death in some people. So the notable experiment it was a noble experiment, trying to make our American society better, more pure, try to prevent domestic violence. All noble, all good intentions, without a doubt, 100% good intention. Complete and utter and total failure. Total failure. It also has an unexpected consequence. You're going to see a rise in gangsterism. Gangstas. Prohibition increases violent crime a lot. Because the lush profits that gangsters could make by having illegal alcohol is going to lead to more crime. Bribery of police officials. Violence against rival gang members trying to sell on your turf. Wars would break out in large cities between rival gangs. Often in immigrant neighborhoods. Because the immigrants of the cities are the ones that don't have a problem with alcohol. And they want it. They just want it. Okay? So each of the gangs are going to try to corner the market on the booze that they sell. And so they don't want other people to sell in their neighborhoods. So if you try to sell in my neighborhood, I'm going to kill you because you're cutting into my profits. That's how gangs worked. Does everybody understand that? Okay, so gangs began to, people like this guy, ever heard of him? Al Capone, one of the most famous American gangsters of all time, nicknamed Scarface. He made his money by selling booze and women and drugs in Chicago. Okay? And in the 1920s, in Chicago, about 500 gangsters were murdered. 500 murders in one city, and they were all gangsters. But they all went to jail, right? Everybody did the killing. Arrests were very few, and convictions were even fewer. As these gangsters they upheld their right to remain silent. They kept their mouths shut. They were button-lipped, what they would say. And that became like the underworld's code. You don't speak to the police. So Chicago was by far the most spectacular example of lawlessness. And by 1925, Scarface Al Capone, who was a murderous booze distributor, he began 6 years of gang warfare, which ultimately made him millions of dollars. Spattered in blood, but still millions of dollars. And he had a driver, drove him around Chicago in a specially made armor-plated car, kind of like the President of the United States. Actually, his car was safer than the President of the United States for fear of someone assassinating him. A rival gang. Al Capone became known as public enemy number one. Enemy of the public. Public enemy number one. Just one example of Al Capone's violent nature and ferocity and greed happens on February the 14th, 1929, Valentine's Day, in what is today known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where in cold blood, 7 unarmed members of a rival gang are arrested by men in uniform who are just Al Capone's men wearing police officer uniforms. They're lined up against the wall and then they're shot with machine guns. Al Capone ordered the hits on hundreds of men. Why didn't he go to jail? Just bribe the judge. You just find one of the jurors, pay him off. In order to be convicted, how many of the jurors have to convict? Have to say you're guilty. All of them. You turn one, you're innocent. You walk free. So they could either just pay him off, and if that doesn't work, you just threaten to kill somebody in their family. That's what gangs did. So nobody would ever squeal on him. Nobody would ever tell because they didn't want bad things to happen to them. Al Capone eventually gets caught, though, on tax evasion. He goes to prison for tax evasion. There's an old movie, The Untouchables. Elliot Ness brings him down for tax evasion, where he goes to prison and is eventually released, but he had contracted syphilis and he becomes insane. Syphilis attacks your brain. It's a sexually transmitted disease. In the final stage, you lose your mind, you go insane. It's curable today, you just get penicillin, but they didn't have that then. So, gangsters, seeing the profits that they could make from alcohol, rapidly moved into other profitable illegal activities such as prostitution, gambling, and narcotics. So honest merchants that were operating their business within the turf of the gang, they had to pay protection money. You guys know how protection money works? The gangsters would go to your honest store on your street corner and say, it'd be a real shame if somebody threw a brick through your window. You should pay us so that doesn't happen. Protection money. Who's going to be one throwing the brick through the window? Them. It's called extortion. And they could make lots of money from extortion. Still exists today in some areas of our country. Okay? This overall eventually turns into what we call now organized crime. It's organized crime. And it became a gigantic business across our nation, with several prominent families in large cities taking the lion's share of the wealth, typically immigrant families. But it's booze, women, gambling, narcotics was big business. How big? These families made more money than the United States government. These families were richer than the United States of America. Big business. We're talking $12 to $18 billion annually. Several times the income of the Washington government. So literally, the Prohibition law incentivizes crime. And that was an unexpected consequence. Trying to be moral and noble and good And it leads to an increase in murder and prostitution and gambling and vices. So it was nobody expected that to happen, but it does. Ultimately, it eventually becomes repealed in 1932 with the 21st Amendment, which says the 18th Amendment no longer exists. That's all it does. So the 18th creates it, the 21st gets rid of it, repeals it. Okay? So questions on prohibition? That's a very, very quick. Women were important when it came to getting prohibition passed. That ultimately led to the 20th Amendment, which does what? If women were important in getting it passed, women get the right to vote. So women gaining political momentum. And prohibition went a long way to help women get the right to vote. Because they were advocates of it. Okay. Questions on prohibition? Monkey business in Tennessee. That's what I like to call this. Talk a little bit about education. Education in the 1920s continued to make giant strides. More and more states were requiring that young people had to remain in school longer. And by the 1920s, you had to stay in school in the 1920s, it went from you had to stay in school till 16 to now you have to stay in school till you're 18. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. How long? Usually you're 18 when you graduate from high school now. So the proportion of students who finished high school almost doubled in the 1920s to more than 1 in 4. So we had a 25% graduation rate. That sounds terrible, but that means that not only that 25% of Americans are have a high school degree, but most Americans are becoming more and more literate because at least you're going to school a little while, where you at least learn to read. Okay. There are still people that can't read. There are. But it's kind of hard to find. Everybody has a phone. Can you imagine what good a phone would do you if you couldn't read? You're just going to play Candy Crush and that's it? I guess. Do y'all even know what that is? Okay. All right. So, also at this time, science was making wondrous advancements. Massive health programs launched by foundations like the Rockefellers virtually wiped out the ancient affliction which had killed millions in its day of hookworms. You guys know hookworm? You get it from eating meat that's not cooked all the way and it just lives in your stomach and eventually kills you because they have little hooks and they hook themselves in your intestines and they eat your food. Okay? Over a while you get a bunch of them. That's bad news for you. Okay, but hookworms become eradicated. I don't worry about getting hookworms now. I'm sure you guys don't either. Also, at this time, we began to see better nutrition, better health care, which led to an increased life expectancy to 59 years. Pretty good. 59. What is it now? Like 75?
It's 75.
It's much better now.
And then for women, it's like 80.
Oh, man. Good for you gals. Okay. Now, so you see increases in both science and education, and you also see increases in the attempted morality of our country. So yet both science and progressive education in the 1920s were subjected to friendly fire from newly organized fundamentalist Christians. This was like an evangelical Christian movement who devoted their religion's teachings at tearing down the teachings of Darwinian evolution, believing that Darwin's ideas on evolution destroyed a person's faith in God and the Bible. Now, evangelical Protestants have this belief, but not all Christians have this belief. Like, Darwinian evolution it's biological. Other religions don't look to learn biology from the Bible. They look to biology. So, also the increase of jazz music, where you dance stuff and listen to music and live, also was a fear of evangelical Protestantism. So, the stage is set for a man named John Scopes. John T. Scopes. In what is now known as the Scopes Monkey Trial. That's what we refer to it as. The Scopes Monkey Trial. Many states, particularly in the Bible Belt South, had laws on their books saying that the teaching of evolution is not allowed in public school. Only creationism is to be taught. And John T. Scopes was a very likable, friendly biology teacher in Tennessee who was indicted and arrested for teaching evolution. Imagine somebody busting up in our school and arresting Miss Wood for teaching. That happened in the 1920s to John Scopes. Needless to say, reporters swarmed this small town in Tennessee. They descended upon this quiet town to witness the spectacle that was about to happen. And it was a spectacle. John T. Scopes is but a humble school teacher. Some of the most famous people in America rushed to his side to be like his attorneys. Former presidential candidates get involved. William Jennings Bryan had run for president before, and he was an attorney. Now, he was a fundamentalist Christian, so he's going to join the prosecution. He has no business doing so. He's not from Tennessee, but he does. It's a spectacle. And he believed he could take the stand as an expert on the Bible. While his criminal representative attorney is a guy by the name of Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow, a criminal attorney, meaning he represents people accused of crimes, is John Scopes' attorney, and he's one of the most. He's like a Kardashian, I guess, today. Like, not like the weird ones, but like like the main one, the attorney, like their dad. He was OJ's attorney, among other people. Famous attorney. All right. So in the days of the trial, Clarence Darrow. He kind of makes William Jennings Bryan appear foolish. And William Jennings Bryan, the story goes that he was so embarrassed that 5 days later he died. Because he does die 5 days later. But he dies of a stroke, not embarrassment. But no doubt the stress of the trial and the embarrassment, probably in the wilting heat of Tennessee courtroom, probably didn't do a lot of help for his health. But this historic clash between theology and biology was totally inconclusive. And Scopes became the forgotten man in the entire drama. While he was found guilty and fined $100, he didn't have to pay for it. They set aside the fine on a technicality. But the fundamentalists won a very hollow victory. For you do see that increasing numbers of Christians were coming to reconcile the revelations of religion with the findings of modern science. So fundamentalism and its fundamental literal reading of the Bible, remained a vibrant force in American spiritual life, as America is predominantly a Protestant nation, and there is a significant amount of evangelicals in America up to this very day. You see those big super churches all over, and nothing wrong with that, but it's part of American life. Okay, especially strong in Baptist churches is the idea of the fundamental literal interpretation of the Bible, and in other rapidly growing churches in the early 1900s, like Churches of Christ, they also have this fundamental liberal interpretation. Not literal interpretation. Okay? Question on the Scopes monkey trial? All right. Okay, so what's the 20s nickname? The Roaring Twenties. What makes it so roaring? What makes the 20s roaring? Prosperity. You guys read The Great Gatsby? Tell me about The Great Gatsby. You guys haven't read The Great Gatsby. I read it, I just don't remember it.
Reading it in English.
Tell me about it. What's the plot? Who's Gatsby? A dude? Dude who throws parties? So is he wealthy? Poor. How do he get wealthy? Unknown. Old money or new money? New money. So there's such thing as new money. So you mean you could be nobody and become somebody? The 1920s were known for that. And there's a great disparity between, it's like you get a third social class. You got poor, you got newly rich, and you got old rich. Remember, you guys ever watched that movie Titanic? And the old rich people look down upon the newly rich people. Like, oh, they just recently got their money. They're trash. That's the 1920s. But money's money. And it doesn't matter who you are. Okay? That's one of, I guess, a great thing about America. It doesn't matter who you are, really. As long as you got money, you're in the crowd. So, prosperity is what really puts the roar in the Roaring 20s. Okay? We're coming right out of the World War I. All of our enemies and all of our competitors' industry is completely destroyed. We got the only game in town. If you want it, you got to buy it from America on planet Earth. So that's good. That's a time of great prosperity for us. Also, all the money that we loaned to England and France, they're getting in reparations from Germany, and things are just hunky-dory for us. Until it's not. Because in 1929, something really bad happens. But before we get to the really bad, let's talk about the really good in the Roaring 20s. Ingenious machines powered by relatively cheap energy called gasoline become implemented in widespread use, especially from newly tapped oil fields of the United States, where there's even more Americans becoming gajillionaires by getting involved in the oil fields of Texas. The assembly line production reached perfection in places like Henry Ford's automobile, where they finished a brand new Model T every 10 seconds. A Model T came off the line every 10 seconds. And our nation's deepening love affair with the automobile became really the character of American society. American manufacturers had mastered production, and now we got to find a way to sell stuff, to find mass markets. And a new industry emerges called advertising. Now, I'm not going to call advertising new, but advertising techniques definitely get refined. So, responding to this need, a new arm of American commerce came into being, Advertising. What is advertising? What is the purpose of it? To make you buy stuff, to motivate you to spend your money. Does advertising work? How much was how much was 30 seconds of advertising during the Super Bowl this year? Anybody know? $10 million? $12 million? Why on earth would a company pay millions of dollars for 30 seconds of air? And once it's over, it's gone.
Because everybody watches the Super Bowl.
Why would they do it though? Because it works. They wouldn't do it if it didn't work. Advertising works. And like the power of ploy and seduction and sexual suggestion are all powerful factors in advertising. You can't watch a commercial without seeing some beautiful girl trying to sell you a cheeseburger or something. Right? That is advertising. Okay? So advertisers sought to make Americans chronically discontent with what they have so that they will feel the need to go out and purchase more and more and more and more. And that is what marketing does. It makes you think that what you have is inadequate. It's not enough. Increase your greed, increase your avarice, increase your jealousy, increase your envy. You see your neighbor pull up with a brand new car? You want one. And it's all done in a way that we don't even notice it. Marketing is fascinating, guys. If you want to make a lot of money and like psychology, marketing is the way to go. Okay, you'd have to leave here because there's nothing here. But go someplace cool and get into marketing, you can make lots of money. Okay, and I don't want to say fun to manipulate people, but that's what you're doing. You are totally manipulating people, but you're doing it in a way to make them spend money. It's not like you're trying to take it. Well, you are taking advantage of them, but you're doing it in an indirect way. Okay, so everything becomes, look, here's a doctor, a picture of a physician selling cigarettes. Hey, they are less irritating. They don't make you feel as bad after you smoke 10,000 of them. So smoke up, have a lucky strike. The doctor says it's okay. A little different than what we have today. The Surgeon General says smoking will kill you immediately. That's basically what we got today. Hey, your kid's looking a little scrawny. Eat some oatmeal. Make your kid husky. Definitely a little different than what we got today. Here's a baby shaving. What's the message here? You're going to have it. It's safe. That's right. Safety razors were a new idea. Like before, if a man wanted to shave, he'd use a straight razor. And I've used a straight razor, and I've nearly cut my face off. All right? But safety razors, they're like today. You can shave it. I can shave it like 15 seconds now. Okay? Previous, if you use a straight razor, you're going it's going to take you a little while. Okay? Because you don't want to cut your face off. Here's an assembly line. It's the Rogue River plant in Detroit where Model Ts were assembled. Just advertising. Here's a soap that washes away fat. I got to get me some of that soap. Yeah. Unless it has like dysentery in it, then it ain't going to work for me. All right. So, advertising in the 20s, definitely a new industry which many Americans could also get profitable on. We're also in the gasoline age, where you see an increase in automobiles, cars. And cars were definitely a mark of our nation's prosperity. And because of the popularity of cars, it increases other industries as well, like rubber. For what? Tires and gaskets. Glass. For what? Windows, windshields. Fabrics. Leather and cloth for making the seats. And then, because of everybody having a car, you're going to need to see highway construction, which increases prosperity because people need to build roads. There's jobs. Service stations. You got to get your car worked on. Garages. Gas stations. If you're going to travel for a distance, you got to have a place to stay. Hotels, restaurants. All of this increases American economy. There were no gas stations, and now there's gas stations. So that's new jobs, that's new industry, that's new money being injected. There were increase. Do you see how all of this compounds and it makes the economy stronger? Okay, so we'll stop there. The gasoline age tomorrow.